one of the reasons why I accepted it, and it's probably pretty strange to see an officer come out and speak about early learning, but we know, and you know the statistics behind it. You've heard statistics that we spend in the state of Washington $866 million in state correctional facilities. We spend about $56 million in early education. So they're staggering statistics. And we start to look at even further. We know that many states look at fourth grade reading and education levels to determine state beds that they're going to need for corrections. But one of the things that kind of staggered me out a little bit was 1 in every 178 U.S. residents will more likely be imprisoned this year. And I thought those were staggering numbers. But what even caught me even more on that statistic or that study said that 70% of the prisoners fall into the 2 levels of reading or lower level reading proficiency, which means that lower literacy relates to crime. 85% of juveniles right now who are in juvenile court are functionally illiterate, based on one of the studies. So we know all these staggering statistics, but how does that play into effect now? How did I come to realize? So I want to kind of tell a little story, and it's hard to take after the doctor because that was an amazing. I wish I would have known that just a couple years ago when I became a parent. But I want to tell a little story and put it in context of how important it is, early education is to law enforcement. I was working with a gentleman that I'm going to refer to him name as Jose. He came to the United States at 1 year old, and he came from Mexico, so his predominant language was Spanish. His parents came for a better life, and they moved over to Eastern Washington, and both of them worked several jobs to try and make sure that they give their sons better lives, and it was actually twin sons. And when they went to school. They went to school in Eastern Washington, and they moved over to King County several years ago and went to school here. And they actually, one of them didn't graduate. At about 12th grade, he actually dropped out. And I kind of lost track for him. I worked for him for about 4 years, and I lost track. And then one day I received a call, and it was Jose, and he called me up and said, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me, Officer Diaz. This is, Jose." And he goes, I'm currently out on bail. And I said, "Well, what are you out on bail for?" He said, "I did a drive-by shooting." I said, "Okay," not expecting that. And then, so I asked him, what happened? And he said, he goes, I was with and we'll use the LVL. It was a little gang called Little Valley Locos. He was associated with, and he said, I asked somebody to do it, they didn't do it, so I carried it out. And I said, okay. I asked, well, what went wrong in your life? Because I wanted to know. I said, what went wrong in your school? What went wrong in your family? What went wrong with us? What went wrong with society? What failed you? Because I thought there was a lot of factors. It's not just, it's him, it's family, it's everything. So he kind of proceeded on to talk about that. He said, well, really, there's one thing. He goes, I can't read. He said, I'm like, you're 12th grade. You got up to the 12th grade. I coached him in wrestling. Got up to 12th grade, and you can't read. He said, yeah. He goes, I moved into the United States at 1. He goes, I learned how to speak English before I went to preschool, or before I went to kindergarten. He didn't go to preschool, I should say. And he goes, I learned to speak English. And he goes, my parents didn't speak English. They speak Spanish, predominant language. And he goes, but I never felt the importance. They didn't read to me in Spanish. They didn't read to me in English. They struggle with learning or reading in Spanish, even though that's their first language. And he kept on going on into, he went to school. When teachers started to realize he would move, that he couldn't read, he would move off to the schools. Well, at one point, at about 5th grade, he joined the Little Valley Locos. He joined the gang. And then his dad, with a lot of wisdom, said, I want you out of here, so we're going to move over to King County. But the kid never dropped the gang affiliation, so he moved over and brought his gang affiliation. When he came over here, that's how I met him. I met him because he was being truant in school. He was being suspended, acting out. And with me, he always wanted to make sure that he was, with me, it was like a mentor. He said, you're like my dad. And one of the things that he talked about is that he said, when we were wrestling, I found hope. And I said, well, how did you get the grades to be able to wrestle? Because in high school, you have to have a certain GPA. And he says, all I had to do was copy. And I said, because he had a brother, he had a twin brother, took same classes. All he did was copy. And I said, so you learned nothing? He goes, I could see and I could understand copying, but I didn't understand the context of what it is. And I said, well, couldn't you copy your way all the way through high school, at least get a GED or a diploma? And I know that was kind of strange for me, but I thought maybe he might be. I go, you might as well go. If you're going to go all the way through, or, at least get a diploma out of it. And he said, at one point, I could no longer hide it. And he goes, when the teacher called me on it, I was ashamed and I dropped out. And I was like, it started to make sense a little bit, but I started to wonder where I missed the signs. Because we would travel for 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day while I was coaching wrestling. And we would travel and we'd go order food, and I'm thinking, how can you not read? And he goes, everything's by picture. Everything now, you open up a menu, everything's by picture now. And he goes, I knew exactly what I wanted. So I missed a lot of the signs. So then, after having a conversation with him, I had to look into myself because, like him, I struggled in school too. I'm 35 years old. I've been on 14 years, and I've seen a lot of different crimes that have occurred, and I've worked with a lot of kids. It's what I do for the department. I work on Seattle Youth Violence Prevention Initiative and the Youth and Families Initiative. And one of the things I had to look into myself, I said, well, what was different from him than what is from me? Because I struggled in school. I moved up from California in my my sophomore year in high school to go to school, and I lived with my grandma. And I said, well, why did I actually be able to read? And one of the things that I noticed is I took a class on learning styles, and I realized I was a kinesthetic learner. So I like to feel, mold, and touch. And one of the struggles that I had in learning is that in school, that's not really the way you're taught. And so I really struggled in school, but then once I actually started to learn my style, I could adapt. And so then that's the reason why I actually started getting more into this early education, because I then, at this point, if you look at my department time, I've been about almost 12 years as a trainer in defensive tactics and integrated combat and control. And all of it when I teach something, it's all about feel. It's all about molding and touching. I don't teach anything that actually you have to actually speak and then say, okay, here's a test on it. I'm not very good at that. So then I said, then I became a parent. And about 4 years ago, like every parent, you think your son's the smartest kid in the world. And they're the most beautiful kids in the world, except for my son looked like a bird when he first came out. But my wife was like, he's so beautiful. I said, he looks kind of like a bird. I'm sorry. But then they become beautiful, then they look, then they're gorgeous, and then they come the shine of your life. So as I'm sitting there learning and trying to develop, and I wish I would have had, the doctor's class, because I think that would have been very important to understand, how to teach them, because I didn't know anything. No one gave me a handbook that said, this is how you teach your son to be school ready. This is how you teach your son to be prepared for whatever he does in life. So I had to wing it, because you look online, you go, well, God, they need to walk between 12 months or 11 months to 2 years. I get, there's no real definitive thing. Everyone says, well, they'll learn as they learn, and people learn at different growing stages. So I'm like, well, how do I know if my kid is behind or right on target? And so that's how I kind of got into really advocating for early learning, because I do a lot of home visits and I work with a lot of families, Latino families, African American families. All of the kids that I work with have high truancy, high suspension rates, that are not getting an education or dropping out of school. And you go back to their report cards since they were in first grade, they all have the same things. All that stuff on ADHD, or they have stuff that are, acting out in class, talking too much. All of and you can look at it from first, second, third, fourth, and fifth grade, all the way up into high school. And it's such a shame, because I'm sitting there noticing all these same things, and you're going, okay, what happened? Well, they didn't become school ready. So then you wanted to say, for me, I started to think, I'm sitting at the bottom of a cliff watching people fall and hoping I catch them. As a police officer, it's almost what we do. People are committing crimes, but all of a sudden there's so many other issues that they don't realize, and so we're sitting there trying to catch them and then arrest them and take them to jail. So then I started to really pay attention that, it's probably better that I climb up to the top and figure out why the kids are falling off. And so that's how I got into early education. Now, mind you, I start to look at my kids and I start to realize that my son is the same type of learner that I am. He's a kinesthetic. He's a feeler. He plays soccer. He does judo. He wrestles, and he does swimming. And I have him in every sport, and because he loves sports, because he likes to feel and mold and touch. And he is in preschool, or he's in threes, class, or pre-K now. But he's only 4 years old. So I have him in all these sports. But then I started to think, okay, now how, as a parent, do I start to get him to be ready for school, like reading and writing and stuff like that? Because I don't know. And I go, I'm actually in a good spot. I have the money to be able to put him in, give him all the tools that he has. But the families I work with don't. And that's where I'm trying to push, is that all the families that we have that struggle with our kids that are dropping out, early education is so important, and you guys are at the front line of it. And I commend you for all of the work that you guys are doing. And it's still a struggle. And I wish there was something out there that we could teach them, that we can give them a handbook and say, this is what your child needs. And then how to actually give it and deliver it to them. Because I look at those numbers of $866 million being spent on state corrections and only $54 million being spent on early education. That floors me. Because as you get deeper in that pipeline, it costs more to incarcerate, and then we don't even rehabilitate them. So not only are we incarcerating, we're keeping them away, and we're trying to protect society, but we're not even rehabilitating them for when they come out. And I can sit there and say, God, if they would have actually had been able to given the tools to read, write, and be able to be comfortable with school, that's the essential part of it. And so that's the reason why I'm here. I thank you guys again for everything that you guys do. I applaud you. People will say, well, God, you protect society. I go, no, it's the real people are the ones that are in the that early education, that are prenatal, and that are really trying to make a difference in many kids' lives. My job is to really kind of correct it as things have broken down. And so thank you again.